Never happened before.
That's right. You got people waiting. 3 people waiting. One of them's me. So.
One of them is me. So there's nobody here.
Oh, there we go.
All right, take two. Take two. Welcome to the 98th episode of the Korea podcast. I just had a restart, man. I just didn't go live. I was blabbering on for like a couple of minutes, maybe 1 minute. All right, welcome to the Korea podcast. I'm your host, Jack, located in Ulsan, South Korea, southern tip of the South Korean peninsula. And I'm joined by Darryl Coote today, who is located in Jeju-do. Welcome, Darryl.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to come on to this crazy podcast, man. This well-hated podcast. The Korea podcast deals with anything and everything to do related to living and working in South Korea, starting a business in South Korea. If you are interested in starting a business, then give me a call. Myself and my wife run a Hagwon business here in South Korea. We're franchising it out. If you're interested, it's 40-year-old history of language teaching all across the world, 14 different countries. So we're here, and if you're interested in doing that, you can. But today, Darryl has agreed to come on the podcast. And how long have you been living in Jeju?
Wow. Well, I first moved here in 2008. So I've been here for a while, but I lived in Seoul for 2 years. And then I also went back to Canada for a short spell. So I've been here for about a decade, give or take a bit,
Right.
you know? Yeah.
All
but
in Jeju.
most of that in Jeju. Most of that. Yeah. I've spent, most of my decade in Korea in Jeju. So 8 of those 10 years.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fantastic. So I've got like a bunch of questions about traveling to Jeju, because that's important, I think. And then some other things that I would like to ask you about Jeju. But first, maybe I also want to talk about your lifestyle, I guess, or your career, work choices, career choices.
Sure.
Let me just check. Lifestyle, I guess. All right. There's sound. Good. Just making sure that there's sound and there's no crazy feedback.
Oh, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a reporter, and I have been a reporter here since 2009.
Okay.
And I now work for UPI, United Press International, which is an American news organization, but I've worked for Yonhap, which is in Seoul, which is why I lived in Seoul for 2 years. And I've worked for, I started my career in 2009 working for a then newly opened Jeju news magazine called the Jeju Weekly. And from there, I, got other opportunities and kind of got my foot in the door that way. And I've worked for newspaper organizations in Canada as well. So that's my career. Now, like I said, I work for UPI, which is an American organization. I work from home, and I work the night shift. So I cover everything that is not Korea related for the newspaper.
Interesting. So what do you report on then for UPI?
Everything that's breaking, right? So, like, for instance, we had the Capitol riots last week. I had to cover the certification of Joe Biden's win. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of State Department stuff because A, I find that interesting, and B, because I overseas, I can, my time difference is similar to China. So I do a lot of covering of China, covering of New Zealand, covering pretty much anything and everything that's breaking.
Interesting. Do you do any other work besides that?
What do you mean?
Like, is that your full-time job, or do you do what most foreigners do here, teaching English?
No, my full-time job is working for the newspaper. I work a shift from 10:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night.
Very nice.
So
Okay.
I have taught,
Mm,
and I enjoy teaching, but um, I also have a wee one. My
yeah.
daughter's just 2 years old, so there really is no time between working for the newspaper, having
Sure. Picking
a
up another
daughter, being a
job.
parent. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Mm.
Totally.
It's nice. I mean, my life is pre-pandemic was very much very similar to like living within the pandemic. I work from home. After I'm done my shift, I stay home and take care of my kid. So it's pretty much the same for
Mm.
me.
So, since you brought up the topic of pandemic, because earlier on before the podcast, you mentioned, I think one of the chat's messages there, that things have been a little bit different in Jeju, right? So, on the mainland, like we've been shut down, kind of shut down for the past month or so. Educational
Uh-huh.
institutions, right? Public schools are closed for the most part, at least
Mhm.
in my region. I don't know. I assume it's the same up in Gyeonggi over there, up in near Seoul. I
Mhm.
don't know if it's in through the entire nation, if there's some parts of Korea that are not closed, but from my personal experience over here, my region, everything's
Mhm.
closed, as well as private schools like Hagwons. But you
Right. Well,
mentioned that Jeju
uh-huh.
has been affected differently, right?
Yeah, it's been we've been really fortunate, right? Like
Mm,
until December, our cases were kept at 70
mm,
total.
right.
Right? So we had very, very few cases and limited local transmission. So most of the cases that we were getting were coming from the mainland,
Mm,
right? Like people, tourists or family members or whatnot, and they were getting checked at the airport.
right.
And because they got checked at the airport, we got the test results really quickly. They were forced to quarantine. So we had really good control of it for quite a while. Since then, since about December, cases have for Jeju exploded. I think we have, I have the number written down here. Hold on, let me pull it up. I think it's about 400,
Mm-hmm.
which comparatively is still low, but for us, it's quite a bit. And it has affected things like saunas. Saunas are now closed. I believe schools have been affected, but not to the degree that they have been on the mainland. I know Hagwons, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
some of them are teaching online and also having in-person classes.
Yeah.
So that is still allowed in some cases. And it also depends on which side of the island you're on. Because
Really?
if you live on the south side, yeah, south side of the island,
Mm-hmm.
depending on, and the north side has more cases than on the south side. So I've heard from people who are living there that they're more restricted there too.
It's interesting
And
because Jeju is not that big of an island, right?
that's very small. Like, I mean,
Yeah. I mean, comparative, right?
you're never more than an hour drive away from the farthest point on the island, right? From wherever you are.
Right.
So it's not very big at all.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to hear that it's almost like, the south and the north are different in some aspect. Weird.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think it says we're back. We're connected. All right. If you're here and you're listening, for some reason, OBS Studios for some reason decided to disconnect us, but we're back online. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Shoosh. All right. Sorry. Go on.
That's okay. So what I was saying is that, Sunset and Chulvang, the tourist site, has been closed until January 17th. Some of the other sites that were also closed for New Year's have been reopened. So it isn't too, you know, detrimental, but it's a tourist island. So businesses are not doing as well as they normally do. So a
Mm,
lot of places have gone, not a lot, sorry, I'm being a little exaggerative. Some places have gone under. And like, for instance, hotels can only keep, even if lots of people were coming to the island, which they're not. I think it's the number of people is down 55%
mm,
in December compared to November. Hotels can only have like 50% capacity.
right.
Restaurants can only have uh, so there are quite strict rules that are having a negative effect upon businesses that heavily rely upon tourism for keep the island going. It's like it's the island's industry, you
Right.
know. So
50% capacity. That's not a lot, man.
no, no, 50%. But I don't even know if the hotels would be hitting that anyways,
Oh, okay. Well, then
right?
that's not really
Like,
a problem. There's not much changed, it seems.
but well, at the moment, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the number for December was 86 international tourists came to the island.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in total it was something like 11,000.
Okay.
And an island like Jeju has lots of hotels.
Yeah.
I don't think I think it'd be easy for I don't think 100% capacity would be 20,000 people, right?
Right.
Since consider we have a lot of five-star hotels, a lot of Mimbox, a lot of boutique hotels. So,
Is that
but it
20,000
is a
people on a regular, like on a daily basis visiting, or just
mm,
that's the max
it's a month.
capacity?
No, no. Jeju used to get a lot, right?
Mm.
Like, and a lot of foreign tourists, though fewer. I think a big misconception is that Jeju has a lot of international tourists, which it
Mm.
does, and it has been courting them for a while, but it's still like Korean. Korean tourists are the main tourists that come to the island.
Right. Okay.
Uh, so even when the pandemic occurred and restrictions on flights from international countries coming to Korea, well, there were still a lot of Koreans that were coming to Jeju,
Mm.
and so like when I was talking to the hotels, I was asking them about how their business was affected, and some of them were like, "Yeah, it's affected, but it's not as horrible as it seemed because our hotel specifically caters to Chinese Korean tourists."
Okay.
And but now it's protracted, right? Like it's
Mm.
it's it's going on. Some of the businesses are hard hit. Mm.
Yeah. On mainland, like I see, I don't know what's happening on the mainland. I think for the most part, maybe population wise, it's a huge difference, right? Smaller or places with smaller populations always seem to be a little bit better at managing its own environments. Like looking at Iceland, for example, right? Um,
Mhm.
you in places with where population is a lot with higher density populations, you've got
Mhm.
a lot wider variety of individualisms of individuals, and so you get a
Uh-huh.
lot more things like people not sticking to the curfew. But for, like around here, most people that I interact with do the
Mhm.
same thing. Everybody's wearing masks. Everybody's staying at home, or keeping to the distances and all that stuff. Um, and so it's strange to see. I mean, well, Seoul. That's what I mean. Like Seoul's got what half of Korea's population lives in Seoul, right? Like 25 million or
Yeah.
something like that. So
Yeah.
it's no wonder that that would be the first place for breakouts to occur,
Uh-huh.
with the exception of Daegu, I guess, which was one of the first ones, massive ones.
Uh-huh.
But like just the recent breakout that was recorded, right? You saw stuff happening in Seoul, and all around the place, all around the country, anywhere else other than Daegu. Like Daegu remained just completely clean,
Mhm.
which is,
Jeju has the benefit of being an island,
yeah.
right? So you're only going to get here by boat or by plane, and those are ports of entry where you have to get checked.
Hmm.
There was a case in the summer where a mother and her daughter came to the island with symptoms, and they traveled to a bunch of places uh, with knowing they had symptoms. And in retaliation, the government sued them in
Hmm.
civil court,
Right.
right? And every store that was affected by their visit
Yeah.
also sued them,
Damn.
right? So yeah, it's very serious.
Yeah.
It's a big, and that's a threat, right? Like if you come to the island knowing that you had symptoms,
Yeah.
you may get a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against you.
Wow, that's crazy. That's interesting. The chief editor here at the Ulsan Online, he
Mhm.
just came back from Canada, and he's self quarantined for 2 weeks. And apparently, the what the government does here now, at least here on mainland, you're required to install an app that basically tracks your every movement. You need to have your phone with you at all times
Hmm.
so that they can trace your whereabouts. And every now and then they send you a message. Like if your phone hasn't shifted locations, they'll message you just to check in. Just for the so you need to pick up
Right.
just to let them know that you are still there, that you're not, you haven't left your phone at home and decided to disappear.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of
Yeah,
it's
we have that
freaky.
too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Mhm.
To me personally, like when he posted the message, I was a bit taken aback, man, because it feels so violating, right? But at the same time, he made the point of saying like Google and Facebook have been doing this for years. It just was a lot
Mhm.
less obvious. Like it was in the contract, like in the very bottom of the 20-page contract that you had to read the agreement, which nobody does, I don't think. And so like you were agreeing to these things anyway
Uh-huh.
without really realizing it, right? Because I mean, most people don't read these things anyway.
Yeah. Well, my wife's family, they came back to Jeju in the summer,
Mm.
and they lived in the apartment above us for their quarantine. And yeah, I believe they had the app. This was a couple months ago though, so things might have changed.
Mm.
And they had someone, the city came and took away their garbage, brought them food, all that kind of stuff while they're in quarantine. And I'm assuming
Yeah,
that's the same on the mainland. I'm assuming that's
yeah,
a like a national program.
yeah. There's somebody who
So,
drops some food at your door. Like you get,
uh,
what do you call those? Like food packages on a regular basis. I don't know if it's on a
right.
daily basis, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what it's been like here on the island. For me, my life hasn't changed that much because, like I said, I work from home. I kind of live in quarantine anyways. But
Mm.
most people, it's safe to say that we have been fortunate on Jeju
Yeah,
compared to a lot of other places in Korea and in the world, where our life has been too uh, greatly affected by it. Yes, we have been affected. We all have been, right? But we've been fortunate in that we've compared to like schools haven't been closed as often as they have been on the mainland. Um, my daughter still goes to daycare. That hasn't never been interrupted this whole time.
mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that was they were on the mainland. Kids cafes were closed
Yeah,
for a while, but we've been lucky. To be upset about our treatment would be a little bit unfair because
yeah,
we've been lucky.
yeah.
Hmm.
Things have been closed here. Like we just opened up our daycare this past week,
Hmm.
and I think my wife was mentioning today we may be looking at getting our parents, our elementary school kids, to come back. They're like the parents. It's mainly the parents, and it's not everywhere. We're located in an area of the city that's known for what do you call it, the tiger moms type deal.
Uh,
Not as severe, but the parents are very cautious here. Like in another part of the city, it's not as bad.
uh-huh.
Schools are still open, but here, parents refuse to send their kids, and so we can't really remain open because there just isn't um, enough to support the business.
Mm.
So we had to move online, um,
Right.
but it's getting too much. Like it's teaching online, it's a different animal, man. And unless you have a properly set up business for that, we're using Zoom, and it's doable, but it's really exhausting, and it's
I'm
not
sure.
it's not the same, right? So
And I'm sure it's hard on the kids as well.
yeah, yeah. And the teachers, like I come in, I sit down at 1 o'clock, and I'm stuck on the computer until almost 6. And then I get home and I do video editing, and it just my eyes are like literally bugging it out of my head. And
Right.
it's the same thing for kids. Like imagine, these little beings, 10, 11,
Hmm.
12-year old or younger, and they're sitting in front of the computer for hours and hours. Because I'm sure, like they do my classes. I know my daughter was studying. Right now she's on vacation, but during school time, she was spending like 2 or 3 hours online with her, public school. So for the Korean kids who do 2 or 3 hours at the same level online with their public school, and then they may be doing another 2 or 3 hours of Hagwon learning online.
Hmm.
Like that's a lot of freaking screen time for these kids, you know?
Without much movement or
Exactly.
socializing or anything like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah. Not to mention the damage it does to their eyes, you know? So
Hmm. Yeah, no, there are going to be there are a lot of studies going on right now concerning online or education because there's a lot of the sample size is quite large.
yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly,
We're
man.
going to be learning a lot about the effects and because there's a lot of issues, maybe not in Korea, but I'm sure there are. But my friend is an expert in this in Canada,
Mm,
and she researches about the inequality with when it comes to doing online learning
mm-hmm,
in Canada, right?
mm-hmm.
Like from home, and issues with like forcing people to have their cameras on and not,
Oh, that's interesting. I just read an article about that. Just literally yesterday, I was editing one
oh,
for Cotiso. Yeah,
huh.
exactly on around those topics, man.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. It's things that you wouldn't necessarily just think about right away. You just
Yeah,
do it, but it affects everybody differently,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Like if we're all at home and you have parents that are fighting in the background, or if
Mm,
you don't want them to see you're in one bedroom with like
mm-hmm.
six other family members or whatnot,
Right.
there could be things, school can be an escape for people.
Yeah,
School is where some kids get their nutrition.
absolutely.
School is many things. It's
Right.
not just, the basic, math and or, English and
Yeah, and then social interaction is hugely important for like young developing children, you know,
yeah.
young developing humans.
Well,
It's
I was covering, you know, especially earlier this year,
mm,
pandemic was pretty much all I was writing about. And
mm-hmm,
so I was covering the UN and the UN Secretary General and also the WHO. They repeatedly were coming out saying it's really important to try to keep schools open for as long as possible. And they're not talking to us necessarily to developed nations. They're talking about developing nations because not having those kids in school, it has to do with their nutrition, but also it puts them in places if they're not in class working.
mm,
So they're fearful about underage kids, child labor skyrocketing.
right,
They're fearful about child marriage skyrocketing. They were fearful about all these issues that they have been fighting for decades to try to eliminate, and it's just going to be, crawled all the way back to where it was. So
right.
when the UN was worried about schools closing,
Mm.
they it wasn't just about education. It was about all these other issues that thankfully a lot of us in the developed world don't have to worry about as much,
Right.
you know? So,
Yeah, I think
mm.
there's going to be a lot of interesting research and data, like you said, coming out after all this pandemic, and there's a lot more than that.
So you've been to the island a couple times.
Yeah, I've been there several times, man. And like both my wife, before we had kids, I traveled. My first time I went to Jeju was in 2006. My buddy
Uh-huh.
and I cruised down on our motorcycles. What is it? 125cc kind of
Yeah.
Rajashi bikes. We scooted
Yeah.
down, took the ferry. There are two ways of getting to Jeju, though,
Right.
by with a vehicle. One, you get down to Busan, you catch a ferry. The other one, well, there's more than two, but from like where I live, the other one is to go to a place called Nokdong. Not too many people know about it. A lot of Koreans are confused. Kind of similar expression, like what? It is,
No, yeah, because I know Mokpo.
yeah, that's on the west side, but there is Nokdong, which is
Uh,
next to Yosu. Are you familiar with
uh,
Yosu? So
uh,
you get to Yosu, and it's Rabbit's Hop to the west, further down. I think it's like the farthest tip on the peninsula here,
uh,
and it's a small little port, Nakdong, and you can catch a ferry from there. As I don't know, back then there was only one leaving
uh,
at like 10 a.m. in the morning, going straight to Jeju, and it was maybe 5 hours or so, 5 hours. So we'd leave at
uh,
10, we'd get there around 1. And so we did. That was my first trip down there. The best vacation ever. My buddy and I on motorcycles, two young dudes, just exploring. Like literally, this was my second year in Korea, right? So it was fantastic.
It's a wonderful place for motorcycles,
Yeah,
by the
it's
way.
beautiful,
It's
man.
the roads are great. They're nice
Hmm.
and smooth.
Yeah.
Um, I had one for many years, and it's the perfect way just to get around the island, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you're never more than an hour really away from anywhere. I
Yeah.
mean, give or take.
Yeah.
So, like, you can go around the entire island. You can circumnavigate it, I think, in 4 hours,
Hmm.
4 or 5 hours
Right.
on the 1132 highway. So, yeah, it's a great way to spend a summer day just driving around, booting
Yeah.
around a 125cc
Yeah, we spent the whole
motorcycle.
week there, man. We spent the whole week, and we stayed in Jimjilbang's,
Uh,
Mimbak's. A couple of nights we just crashed out on the beach, and
yeah.
like if it rained, and actually the week we were going, there was a lot of rain being predicted, and we ended up,
Mhm.
yeah, like you said, we if it was raining on the east, we'd go to the west side of the island, and it was nice and sunny.
Yeah.
And if it caught up with
Yeah.
us, we'd go right back to the other end, you know. And
Yeah, it's odd how Jeju. I'm not sure if that's like that on the mainland, but literally you could be like 5 minutes away from another place, and it
mm,
could be pouring rain over there, and
well, I think it's
you're
got a lot to
fine
do
where
with the
you are.
volcano, you know, right in the
Yes.
middle, and it's pretty tall, and it
Mm.
keeps a lot of the wind and the air movements kind of separated, you know.
It's amazing. You could be on one side of the mountain, it'd be snow, and the other side, it'd be sunny as
Yeah,
as like a completely different day. The weather is often 3 degrees different on a high warmer on the south side than it is on the north side, just because of that mountain,
so
right?
since we're on that topic, I wanted to ask any advice for travel to Jeju. I guess particularly now during COVID, if there's people wanting to travel, and with the craziness of the weather and how it works, do you have any like travel advice for people wanting to travel to
Oh,
Jeju?
that's a really good question because it's it's important, and this might apply to any place that's like a tourist destination, but it's important to remember that you're vacationing in somebody else's home, right? Like when
Mm,
you go to these towns and stuff, they've been fighting really hard to keep the virus at bay. So be really conscientious of following the rules,
mm.
right? Like the social distancing rules, the mask rules, things like that.
Yeah, you don't
That's
want to get a
would be the
million
first thing.
dollar lawsuit slapped against you.
Right. Yeah. But, well, I mean, it's even the same thing for Koreans on the mainland. Like, yes,
Mm,
Jeju is Korea, but at the same time, it's like you may feel like it is Korea, but at the same time, these people, the natives here, they're Jeju natives, right?
mm,
Like this is their villages. My in-laws have lived in Jungmun for like 400 years.
mm,
Like that's a really long time, and I'm assuming it's like that on the mainland too.
right.
But the distance and coming to the island has a little bit of a different, I don't know, a different effect, and it
Well, I think
makes
living on an island has a different
feeling
effect on
distant.
people to begin with, you know? Like island
Sure.
life anywhere is just, it's a different feeling. I don't know what it
Yeah,
is.
Jeju has a reputation for being slower,
Yeah,
than the
right.
mainland,
Uh-huh.
right? Like there was a push to get like Daum and a bunch of the IT companies down here because they're like, like come, it'll be like a new Silicon Valley. You can come
Yeah,
down to
right.
Jeju and it'd be slower life. And Jeju has really been pushing to become it was pushing to be an IT hub, but now it's
Uh-huh.
really pushing to become like a green hub. It
Yeah.
wants to be carbon free by 2030 and have all electric cars. And it
Okay.
has a village out on the east side
Hmm.
that is, I reported back on it in 2010. They were giving people uh, satellite dishes, not satellite dishes, sorry, solar panels
Right.
and smart appliances and smart everything that could be possibly added with the adjective smart to it to all the people
Mm,
in the village to try to convert it as like a test hub, a test city to see if you could make in Jeju entirely environmentally friendly when it comes to energy,
mm,
right? Like there's quite a few wind turbines now. It's really cool. I think it's quite beautiful, the wind turbines. When I was reporting in Canada, in the rural Canada, people didn't like them. Actually, there was like wind turbine protests, and people were didn't thought that ruined the scenery among other issues. But here they don't really have that kind of concern. There isn't that resentment towards the wind turbines or fear of them at least. So it's a really it's a special island. It's a special island with its own special history that is you know, it's its own that is different from the rest of the mainland.
Hmm. Um, you are writing a book, right? In the
Mhm.
little bio that you sent me, which is also attached below the video for those who are interested. Um,
Yeah.
you are writing a book on the Jeju Massacre, and
Yeah.
I'm aware of the term, but I'm
Uh-huh.
completely unaware of what actually transpired.
Sure, a lot of people are, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, because when I came to the island, a lot of, especially the English speaking world, didn't really know about it.
Mm.
And that was back in 2008, 2009. Things have changed, thankfully. A lot of people are starting to learn about it.
Hmm.
But do you know anything more than the term?
No, basically not. Really, I
Mhm.
may have heard, I may have been educated on it a little bit years back, but it probably was
Mhm.
very fleeting and not, not enough to like
Mhm.
leave an impression.
Sure, that's because part of the reason for that is because it's been suppressed until like 2000,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So discussion of it was, in some ways physically suppressed by
Mm.
the Seoul government, and also by ostracize, like making it a taboo subject to talk about.
Hmm.
People didn't want to mention that they were victims of it. So I'll backtrack a little bit, and I call it the Jeju Massacre, but that isn't actually its official name. It doesn't have an official name
Hmm.
because the truth about what really happened isn't really known yet. They call it Sasam
Hmm.
in Korean, which is April 3rd, and its name translates to April 3rd incident,
Okay.
which isn't correct, but that's because there is political debate over what it should be called. Some people want to call it an uprising. Some people wanted to call it um, a resistance, or call it um, like the massacre. It depends on which political side of the spectrum that you belong to. I go with massacre because I want to go like side with the victims of it.
Hmm.
But some people choose uprising because they don't want to be seen as victims. And so what really happened was back in after the Japanese occupation of the peninsula, people on Jeju, there was a vacuum of government here. Uh,
Hmm.
and the people who took over and led the government were left leaning the labor union. And after um, and the day that is associated with is April 3rd, 1948. But the actual day it started was March 1st, 1947, when there was a protest on Jeju at Gwendokjeong, which is like near City Hall in the mainland, when a police officers opened fire on the crowd, killing 6 people and
Hmm.
injuring 8. And this started the ball rolling, or lit the tinders on fire, because then the island went on to have a general strike,
Hmm.
and everybody went on strike on the island, which convinced Seoul and the mainland, the new government, that Jeju was a communist hotbed,
Hmm.
because what they were protesting against was the division of Korea.
Hmm.
They didn't when the people were shot, and because it became considered a red island,
Hmm.
the new the new government, Lee Seung-young, they drew a line around Jeju, and they
Okay.
said anybody found with inland 5 kilo. They drew a line around Jeju. They said anybody who's found within the island that's not within a 5 kilometer band around the coast is considered a rebel
Hmm.
and will be shot to death.
Hmm.
And so over a very short period of time, the winter of 1948 to 1949, 30,000, upwards of between 25,000 and 30,000 Jeju residents were killed
Wow.
by the government. So
Hmm.
the island itself is really it's a graveyard. Like when you land here at the airport, there are still bodies underneath the tarmac because that's where that was the site of an execution.
Hmm.
So it's something that a lot of people don't know about. It's something that we are still trying to figure out about,
Mm-hmm.
particularly Americans' involvement in
Right.
it, because they were, they were here on the
Mm-hmm.
island
Mm-hmm.
and they were supporting the government, but they don't know if the Americans actually gave orders uh, to go through with the South Korean government's scorched earth policy.
Right.
Hundreds of villages were burned on the mountain region. Hundreds of them gone,
Mm.
and and this is still a very much a defining. Of course, it is. Every Jeju family was affected by it.
Right.
It's still there are still survivors here. When I talk to survivors and I ask them, like one man in particular who's from my hometown,
Mm.
where I live now in Jungwon, I asked him, like, do you know the police officer that killed your family? He said, of course I know the police officer who killed my family. I know his name. There are
Wow.
still people who live on the island who are, it's an island of victims, neighboring, like the people who victimize them, and
Wow. That's
not
crazy.
to a huge degree. Yeah, it is.
Wow.
It is, and it's very interesting, and it's really horrible. And I hope I don't sound too glib or glossing over it because I didn't even mention
Well, it's not really a.
April 3rd.
No, okay. Yeah. Well, no, I think it's probably a it's an in-depth, pretty deep topic. So I don't think you could give it justice. Just kind of
Mhm.
discussing it on a hour-long podcast here. So crash course.
It's very complicated.
Yeah. Sure.
I've been researching it and interviewing survivors since pretty much since 2009 to 2010.
Hmm.
And there's a right now there are people who were convicted by court martials during Sassam that are trying to get their charges like expunged.
Hmm.
And I did a story about it last year where they were awarded some 19 people who were wrongly convicted through court martial received about $4 million in compensation from the government.
Hmm.
And there are more people who are trying to get their records expunged because I believe it's what 2,580 people were convicted in two mass court martials, and they're hopefully going to get their records eventually expunged because there's no records
Hmm.
remaining. They were rounded up in mass. There were henyos and children, and just it's yeah, it's just awful, and those convictions prevented them from getting work and prevented their families from getting decent work on the island.
Right.
And
Until now.
yeah, yeah, until well, only in 2003, President Moon apologized
Hmm.
for what happened, and
So that's very
it,
recent. It's not like this is kind of ancient history, man. This was very recent.
yeah,
Still to
very
this
very
day,
recent.
obviously impacts people, right?
Yeah, well, 2 3 years ago was the President Moon came to the April. They always have a ceremony on April 3rd for in memorial for those who died during the whole massacre.
Hmm.
And Moon came and apologized for it again in 2018, I want to say, and that was big news
Hmm.
because no president had come
Right.
since Moon, not Moon, since Roe. President Roe apologized in 2003. No one had come since. The vice president came, but it's such like a controversial issue and wrought with politics that for it's still a statement for a president to come here
Hmm.
to acknowledge what happened.
Right. I guess most of the politicians would very gladly just, dismiss it, and forget that it ever happened, and just kind of shove it under the rug and never talk about it, right?
Well, like it's because it's not just the massacre; it's also the suppression of it afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath Park Chung-hee, um, people would, were okay. So, for instance, there's Hyung Ki-sung who wrote a book called Aunt Suni or Suni Samchon.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Jeju writer, and he wrote the book in 1973. I don't have it in front of me. Let's see if I can find it. And when he wrote the book, it's sort of about, like, it is about the massacre, but it doesn't directly discuss guilt,
Mm-hmm.
but it's about a family that was affected by it. And it's by Hyung Young. Sorry, I mispronounced his name before. And I interviewed him about him, and he said after the book came out, he was taken by police
Mm-hmm.
and beaten for, I want to say 3 days. I don't have the article. I don't have my interview with him right in front of me, but he was beaten, and till he said he was covered in bruises the color of ink.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't the fear and the effects of it just
Right.
continues today.
Interesting. It's interesting you talk about fear because I talked. One of my students is in his 60s, and we have pretty good conversations, and I get a lot of info about Korea and Korean culture, and he's a very good source because he's been around for so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he basically made the point that Koreans as a society have been through so much crap, and this Jeju event adds to it. You had like the Japanese invasion, and prior to that there was the Shilla dynasty or the Korean dynasties, which were not the best places to be either. And there's always strife and always kind of like this presence of constant fear. People were always afraid. There wasn't enough food. Somebody would come kill them for one or another reason. And it's like he basically made the point of saying that Koreans have always lived in a state of fear, and so people always. I find it personally that the first response from my wife, for example, it's like this panic. People react instead of thinking and coming up with solutions. The immediate response to any crisis is panic, and the worst thing that could happen is going to happen. Which kind of like yeah.
The history here is, I'm from Canada. My history has thankfully been, except for my Hungarian side, which they had to escape, Nazis during the prior to the Second World War. But like my life and my parents' life has been relatively free of any of these kind of concerns that Koreans have had to live with and deal with, and that has like permeated their culture and make, it's, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm so taken by this, is partially because of my own family history, but because it's still here, right? Like people are still, my father-in-law, we go for walks and he shows me a beautiful island, goes, oh, people were killed there. Oh, they come over here. This is like,
what a bummer, eh?
Yeah, well, like people had to give up bequeath land to get people out of jail.
Yeah.
Family members to try to spire people.
Still very real. Yeah, that's the thing. Like a lot of people, I think most people come into Korea, me including myself, my first year in Korea, most people are just really ignorant about Korea and Koreans, and so like you're looking at the older people, the ajushis and the grandfathers, and you complain about them, but like these people have been through so much shit. Most of the young population, like people coming in here, have absolutely no idea. And when we sometimes say, oh, the older generation feels entitled, they kind of do, because they kind of probably feel like they've I don't know, when you're a human being and you go through so much shit in your life, like your perspective on life changes and your attitude changes, and maybe you I don't know, you do feel entitled because you rightly should be. I think,
Uh,
you know.
well, I was like you. I didn't know about any of this before I came
Yeah,
here. So
yeah.
it's been a huge education, and
Mm,
I'm still trying to learn about it.
sure.
I still because and people Koreans uh, don't know about this event that well either, and that's
Mm.
because, like I was saying, we still don't know really all that happened with it either,
And I guess
right?
it's
Like
not
we're
really
still searching.
taught about in schools, is it? It's not
It is
something that's in the
now.
text. It is in the
It
textbooks.
is now. Yeah,
Okay.
it has to
Yeah.
be. It is now, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
And when it was taught before, it was taught as a communist uprising,
Right.
right? So the people, so what that did was it made it seem like Jeju, until the apology, until like
Mm-hmm.
2000,
Mm-hmm.
was a communist haven. So
Right.
if you had somebody that was killed, or if you had suffered during your family had suffered during the massacre, then that was guilt by association.
Mm.
And like I said, 25,000 to 30,000 people were killed. There was only 300,000 people on the island at the time. That was 1/10 of the population.
Crazy.
Every family had at least one like family member killed during it. So if that guilt by association would made people not want to talk about it because they didn't want to be seen as or to be considered communist
Mm.
or labeled as such.
Right. Right.
People. So
So
yeah.
when do you see your book coming out?
I have to finish writing it first.
Well, so that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Do you have a goal? You got a name?
no,
It's just a work in
probably.
progress.
Well, no, I've been working on it, but
Mm.
it's been a lot more research,
Well, I can imagine,
and
man. I can imagine.
uh,
There's tons of it.
well, it's going to be. It's so far. It's going to be interview based. I'm not really as interested in the politics
Mm-hmm.
of it for this book. I'm more interested in trying to get the experiences of the people who remain down on in print,
Right.
and
Right.
like they were all children when this happened,
Mm.
and so it's really tough, some of the interviews,
Mm.
so because they because it's a horrible time in their lives,
Mm.
and you they all talk about being hungry,
Right.
every single one, and that's what what I like. I'm trying to find the proper words, but they break down when they talk about how hungry they were.
Mm.
I can't imagine losing my parents at that age. I
Sure.
can't imagine having to. Like, there's this one woman I interviewed, and she was 11, and she was hiding in caves, little caves that pock Jeju Island,
Mm-hmm.
with her two older brothers, eldest brothers. They weren't older than her. She was the oldest child,
Mm-hmm.
but and then she was the eldest of four siblings, and then within a matter of months, she was the only sibling left because they all died of starvation.
Wow.
Right, like it's awful.
Yeah.
And she was 11, and her parents. I can't
How
imagine
how old
being
is
a
she
new
now?
father. Um,
Do the math, please.
she is. Let me see. I think she's 89.
Mm.
And she's very lucid. And she. Some people have a harder time talking about it, like remembering. Such
Mm.
a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't blame them,
But I would
but
imagine that. Oh, you mean like some of the people you interview are having a hard
yeah,
time remembering? Yeah.
yeah.
I could imagine that a lot of it probably gets pushed down, into forgetfulness,
Well, I'm in my
intentionally.
30s, and I've misremembered things.
Sure. Well, memory is never perfect. It's not like it's not photogenic memory. It doesn't really work in that way, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's something that that's a history to the island that still affects it today that a lot of people don't that realize that, you know?
Yeah.
And I hope people when they come here they try to learn more about it. That they view it kind of through that lens as well, you
Mm.
know, that this tragedy is still here
Yeah.
and you know, like the elderly people that you'll see will probably be survivors of it. That this is part of their history, personal history.
Yeah, you would hope so. But I gotta say, unfortunately, I think most people who will come to Jeju will, that's one of the things that they probably will never actually dig up on it. I can see the majority of people coming to Jeju, including Koreans as well, may have probably heard of the massacre.
Uh-huh.
Just, it's a term. Oh, there was a Jeju massacre, but they would probably have no idea what it was. And definitely not the details you just described. So I think, like having you publish this book is very important. So that's your mission, man.
Oh, it's kind
Well
of
done.
you to say.
It is. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, because otherwise it's just one of those things that will go into forgetfulness.
Right. Well, there's a lot of great Korean work that's going on in the Korean language too. There's a lot of great researchers here. Hankyoreh, the newspaper,
Hmm.
they have a Sasam section, and I think maybe it's still up. But they had a Sasam. Yeah, they call it the April 3rd incident. Like I
Hmm.
said, that details it, and they do a uh, regular but feature or article about it from time to time.
Hmm.
It's not like a scheduled thing because they have a writer on the island who's looking into it.
Okay.
It's and that's all in English, and they also have a Korean section. So there's more and more information about it out there, and there's more and more scholars who are doing work into it.
Hmm.
We just need now to get the American military to open its vault
Right.
so we can see.
That's gonna
It'll
be a
be
tough one.
yeah,
Open
they
up the
don't.
American vault.
Yeah, they haven't been as forthcoming. There is stuff. They have given lots of information, but
Hmm.
not enough.
Just whatever they wanted to give, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever declassified,
Yeah.
whatever they declassified over time.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, next time you come, I'll take you to the museum. There's a wonderful museum about it on the island.
Dude,
Really
next time
informative.
I'll come. I'll be sure to give you a buzz because
Mhm.
who knows when that's going to happen, right? But I would love to.
Yeah, it is like that aside, it is a beautiful island. There's lots to see, lots of wonderful nature sites.
To Jeju, we should move to Jeju. Even after opening our Hagwon, we were like, let's
Mm.
move our Hagwon to Jeju though, because
Yeah.
it's a perfect place. Like the program that we had kind of would work good, well and all that stuff, man. But it's a big move, It's a big move to
Uh,
like relocate your life to a city that's an hour away from where we live, And Jeju
mhm.
is like it's a lot farther. But I
It
would love.
is. It's also changed. Like it's amazing. You were here in 2006, right? And the amount of change that has happened to the island since then. Like there's an entire English town,
Hmm.
English like education town now on the island that wasn't here 5 years ago, 6 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. Well, that's probably one of the reasons why we were thinking about moving,
Uh-huh.
because I think that was kind of like our aim at being part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the amount of wealth that is brought into the island that wasn't here before, because the
Mm,
whole purpose of that was to prevent Koreans and
mm,
Korean money from going to Canada with
mm.
their children or the American, like to keep families together and keep,
Yeah.
currency here and to
Right.
keep,
Right.
so they brought the schools here.
Mm.
And that has drastically changed the outlook of the southern side of the island for sure.
Yeah. There's a good international school from what I hear. With a pretty good reputation.
There's many of them.
Mm,
There's like 4 or 5 schools,
mm,
one from Canada, the States, England,
mm.
private schools.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't go to private schools, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with.
I can imagine that the pricing is quite skyrocketed over there, quite high. On that.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. More money than I make. I tell you that. Yeah,
Well, I don't know. Have you been following Bitcoin? If you're invested, you should be flying,
yeah.
flying high.
No, I did not. I did not get in Bitcoin when getting in was good.
Yeah,
Why? Is that
2000.
one of your
Uh,
hobbies?
sorry. Well, I got in 2007. Got wrecked hard on the way out of 2018, and yeah.
Mm.
But, watching the cryptocurrency market right now it's I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, it's adventurous. I'm trying to regain my balance again, but it's interesting because I think it's got potential in the future. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But
Well, let me see what it's called. Jeju government
oh,
has made a cryptocurrency.
oh yeah,
Yeah, because they want to be a cryptocurrency hub.
ah, well, there you go. I remember Seoul was trying to build something like that. Icon was considered one of those projects that would support it, and was doing quite well. It's gone completely in the crapper right now, but
Hmm. Yeah, it's called Jeju Coin.
interesting. Jeju.
Yeah, they wanted to make Jeju a blockchain hub
Uh huh.
and make its own. Jeju wants to be a hub of a lot of things, though,
Sure.
right? Like it's tries to. It wants to be a peace hub. It wants to be a conference hub. It wants to be a lot
Right.
to for many things, which kind of gives it a feeling that it's spreading itself out too thin.
Uh huh.
But uh,
More
it seems that
projects.
way. But
You
I don't
got
know. But
based on
if it works, it
probability. The
works.
more projects, the more shots. Eventually, one of them will take off. I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
All right. Well, like this was. I had a bunch of other questions, man, but this was a very good talk.
oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I hope I didn't take up
No, no, that was
ramble too
perfect. Like,
much.
the aim was to talk about Jeju, and we did precisely that. And I think you brought a very good perspective on what Jeju-do, the history of Jeju, because I think a lot of people, most people, I would say, who hear Jeju, don't know anything about it other than that it's an island, it's pretty, but like the
Hmm.
actual history of Jeju-do um, remains hidden for most of us, I think.
Hmm.
So, you know. So I guess like if you are listening, for those who are listening and are interested in digging more information up, you can go to Google and just type in April 4th incident. Is that
April 3rd. April
April
3rd.
3rd? Yeah.
Or you can contact me. I can always direct you in the right way. So I'm on Twitter at Darryl Coote. Facebook, Darryl Coote as well. There's lots of good stuff out there. It just takes a little bit of searching. The government has a Jeju 43 website that is it's which I have some work on that I helped with parts of it. So I have some work there as well. It's a good place to start
Mm.
if you're interested.
And Daryl's links are listed below the video, so if you want to
Mm-hmm.
contact him, you can find his Facebook contact below, as well as Twitter and Instagram, which are at Darryl Coote, right? Both
Oh,
Instagram.
and I will be, if you don't mind if I plug, I'm going to be starting a new Jeju podcast shortly called Me, You, and Jeju, which is going to be a Jeju culture and news centric podcast. So keep a lookout for that.
That'd be interesting. Are you doing that by yourself, or are you collaborating?
Yeah, me and a friend, Alexis, we're going to be putting it together. We've been working on it and planning it for the last couple weeks, and after months of talking about it. So hopefully we'll be up and running in about 2, 3 weeks before February we're gunning for. So,
Very nice.
uh,
Okay. Well, I expect to get an invitation on that podcast as well.
you will.
All right.
You'll be busy.
Fantastic. All right, Darryl. It was really good getting you on here and talking to you, man. We've hit the 1 hour mark, so we're gonna wrap it up.
Perfect. It's well past my bedtime, so that's probably a
Yeah,
good
I
call.
want to get to
I,
that too.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
no problemo. Take care, Darryl. We'll talk again, yeah?
Yeah.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
Bye.
Alrighty. Well, that's pretty much kind of more or less it for our podcast. Very few people here, but that's okay. I know that there is an audience out there, despite of all the events that took place on Facebook just recently, just yesterday. I know there's a lot of haters. I don't always say the right things, but I don't really care. There is no such thing as right things. I'm not. What is it? My intentions are good. If you don't see eye to eye with me, we don't have to. We don't always have to see eye to eye. But yeah, Darryl. Sorry, Darryl. Darryl says, I didn't realize where you were hanging up when the show ended, so I apologize. I rambled a bit. No, dude, all good. So yeah, if you're here on the podcast, if this is the first time that you're here, make sure to hit that like button, smash, subscribe, smash the like button and bell button off, and make sure to go back and rewatch the video. Very good talk with Darryl, who had some very good insights on Jeju, its history. And if you're interested in getting in touch with Darryl and finding out more about what's happening in Jeju and how it's progressing and where it comes from, its history, then make sure to check out one of his links below. Get in touch with him if you have questions. And other than that, yeah, today is the what's today? 11th of November. No, the 11th of January. 11th of January. So I hope everybody's having a fantastic day today. Everybody have a good week, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Make sure to come back for an upload, another climbing upload. I think this week sometime should be an epic one. Another, I think, I can't remember. Anyway, have a fantastic rest of the week, and we'll see you in the next one.